Namaste, welcome everybody, hello to everyone out there in YouTube land or elsewhere if you're watching this. My name is Louisa, welcome to my channel. I haven't made any content for a while, so I'm kind of excited to share some thoughts with you. I'm sitting in a beautiful forest in Queensland where I come often for my walks and just to be with the natural energy, so I hope that it looks as pretty on camera as it does for me sitting here. So today I just wanted to share about a topic on story in terms of your own personal story. This concept of ourselves that we kind of carry around, like, well, many analogies come to mind. A suit of armor to protect ourselves. Sometimes our stories can feel like a ball and chain that we're dragging along behind us. And I find it a very important topic whenever I'm working with somebody in a counseling sense, or when I'm working with groups of people doing my teaching, that it comes up again and again. And I've always been interested in it because I recovered for myself from, as some of you know, some quite severe diagnoses of mental illness, such as schizophrenia. I recovered from those experiences partly by utilizing my story. That is a kind of a manifold process, which began with realizing that I even had a story in the first place, that I was telling myself a story, wrote automatically. It was kind of on a playback loop in my mind, and I absolutely believed that story. As I dug down and I realized, wow, you know, this story about myself, I've been carrying it for most of my life. And a lot of the messages in that story were bad messages about how I'd failed and how I hadn't been good enough and how I was broken and how I should be doing this or should be doing that. So it was, first of all, a process of unpacking my own story and realizing that I even had one to begin with. And then a process of analyzing whether that story was true or not. Really sort of digging in deep to ascertain the value of the story and work out what I wanted to keep and what I wanted to reject. Now, this isn't an easy thing to do. It's not like just going through a cupboard full of clothes and saying, I don't like that shirt anymore, I want to get rid of it. Your story is going to feel like an intrinsic part of you, and there will be a part of you that believes you can't get rid of it, that you shouldn't get rid of it, that you need it somehow. This part of you, we call it ego, right? It's the part that... Ego is essentially your story construct. It's the personality that you've created for yourself based on what other people created for you, right? We don't create stories consciously, not when we're little, and most of us don't even create them consciously when we're adults. But it's kind of it's given to you. It's stories, messages that you get from your parents initially, and then your family, broader family, and your community and your society. Now, I go into this in depth in my story mentoring course, which is one reason why I'm making this video today, is just as a kind of a shout out as well that I'm about to launch this course. And if you're watching this video at a later date, that's okay, because I'll probably be running it again and again. And I want to help people understand where they get their stories from. That's one part of the course that I'm teaching. So I won't go into that right now because it's too big a topic. Suffice to say that the stories are given to you by those different layers and levels of the world for you, which is, as I said, your parents, your family, your community, and your society. And we take on those stories then as if they are our own. We believe them. And then they become, as I said before, that part of you that you just feel like you cannot live without. This must be true about me. This is my story. And if I can give you one message today in this short video, it is to say that your story is... I'm gonna take a risk here and say your story is not true. Okay? And you're probably arguing with me, but of course it is. It's my story. This is what happened to me, and then this happened, and this means this. I'm going to suggest to you that even though certain things have happened to you and those parts of your story may be fact, story is more than just facts. Story is the meaning that we give those facts. Story is our perspective on why it matters and what it means for our lives and what it means about us. And that's the stuff of story that we can actually change. So while you may not be able to change certain facts about your experience, obviously, you're born into this body, you were born in a certain country in the world, into a certain type of family, you've got this name, you've got these parents. These are facts. But what does that all mean? That is open for change and discussion and exploration at all times. And I say that your story isn't true because it can't be true, right? What is truth? Truth at the absolute level is somewhat beyond most of us on the planet right now to reach, because it is an absolute pure experience of source consciousness. That is my definition of truth. So everything that's interesting. The throat chakra is our expression of our truth, right? So source consciousness, all that is true, all that is. But as human beings, we only get to experience a tiny little sliver of that reality, which is our point of perception in this infinite ocean of existence. Our point of perception cannot be true. It's just a point of perception, right? So there's always going to be another meaning you can give it, which may also be true. There's layers and layers and layers and layers and endless, infinite layers of truth to every single story. And there's infinite numbers of perspectives of that story. So if I claim that my story about my childhood is true, the closest I can really get to having that be an authentic statement is to say, it's true for me, that version of the story. That feels true for me. My version of my childhood is completely different to my brother's version of our childhood and what was happening in our family. So he has a different version of his truth. And my father does, and my mother does. And so it is with absolutely everything. You can go on a picnic with some friends and have all these different variations of the same day, because that is the miracle of our existence. We get to perceive our little bandwidth of truth and to live that as our reality. And that is our experience. That is our honor, our privilege, our gift. The gift of life is to be able to create our own story and live our own story. Now, we could get into the philosophy over how much is destiny, how much to be created, how much free will do we have. I might not go there in this video just because I might get myself on a philosophical tangent that is irrelevant. I'll just stick with this idea that you can construct your story based on your perception. And therefore, if you can do that, you can always change it, right? Because why would you want to change your story? Well, so many of us are carrying around literally a ball and chain of a story. Some kind of heavy, negative, trauma-based, all this awful stuff happened to me. It was unfair, it was this, it was that, right? And there's going to be parts of you that don't want to let that story go, because you will find that the ego, it's so clever. I just have to admire the intelligence of the universe that gave us this thing called ego. It will justify and use that story to justify your current behavior patterns. Whatever habits you have or unconscious things that you play out, triggers that for getting angry, bad habits that you have around eating too much or gambling or whatever your vice is, right? You're going to use the story to justify it in some way. It's very, very tangled, and only you can kind of work out where your ego is doing that. It does take some time. This is the stuff of psychotherapy. This is why therapy can be so useful in unpacking your story as a tool. Because what you'll do is you'll speak a story to a therapist and they'll pick up, wait a minute, you keep focusing on how women are really bad, and I wonder what your relationship is like with your mother or yourself. Is your perception of all women being bad a perception of your own wounding of the feminine? Yeah, so there's always going to be a link. Whatever storytelling about the world and your experience, you can bring it back to some belief that you have based on usually an experience of the world, right? So it's a construct, and if it's a negative one, if it's a negative story you've been telling yourself, you're going to find that you're trapped in an unconscious story, and therefore you're also trapped in an unconscious life. You're creating a reality constantly from that story, because what you think and what you feel is what is reflected in the world around you. And people used to tell me this years ago when I was kind of reading my first self-help books and journaling a lot and really inquiring about the world, and I would hear that all the time: you create your reality. And I just didn't understand it until I had a personal experience about it. You have to have some measure of faith until you get evidence for it. But I can 100% tell you that it's true, at least in my version of reality, because I used to carry these really negative stories around with me, and my experience was not that great. If you have negative stories playing out in your head, there's going to be an effect on the world around you, on your experience. You're going to experience a negative reality, right? It's actually pretty simple the way the universe works. I just realized that there's this very bright light coming in, so I might just move the camera a tiny bit and hope that improves it. Okay, so I did transform my story through a whole lot of hard work. As I said, basically went from being a bad story about myself to a phase in between where I had to basically question a lot of my beliefs on what is reality, what is my story, how did I construct it, can I rearrange it? There's a whole process of kind of self-doubt around that, because we don't believe necessarily, and we have to live through several ego deaths to rid ourselves of the stories that no longer serve. We have to let go of those things that we no longer need, and then reconstruct a new story. And for a while it's a bit like fake it till you make it, because if I want to construct a story about myself as being a really happy person, but I'm not feeling happy, I'm going to have to make incremental changes. Our stories don't usually snap and change. Occasionally some of us experience, shattering events which force us into a new story, like somebody close to you dying, or a whole lot of loss. Often it's around suffering. Sometimes it can be around incredible moments. I had an amazing moment many years ago now. I think it was around 2005 when I experienced spontaneous 3-month state of rapture, of communion with God, and a kind of a massive heart opening, which did radically alter my stories. Boom, like that, But those things come along rarely. In between all of that, we still have to work in a kind of a more methodical, plodding way, incremental way, to adjust the story, to tinker with it, to change it, to test it. We might just work with a few thoughts initially. We might work with one aspect of ourselves, like, are you carrying a story about how your body isn't good enough? You're too fat, or you're too thin, or you're too this, or you're too that. What is that story? Where does it come from? And can you alter it a little bit? How can you alter it incrementally? If you try to jump too quickly, if you tell yourself, I am, stunningly beautiful, but you really, really, really don't believe it, it's probably too much of a leap. You've got to find small ways. You've got to, it might be around just honoring your body, first of all, taking care of it, having nice baths with lovely essential oils, and dressing nicely the way that you feel good, and making sure you're grooming yourself. And it's a process, right? It's a process. But what you're doing is you're gradually changing the story and creating a new one. Now, one of the traps of ego is that the ego will continually tell you that the new story you're creating is not true and the old story is the only truth. And this is, again, because ego is the story. Ego doesn't want to die. Ego holds on with all of its might to the old story. So you have to get used to that voice which says this isn't true, and then you just train yourself not to believe it. Right? You can't just get rid of it. I know it's just going to be there. It's like the inner critic, but you can train yourself to catch those thoughts and ignore them. Sometimes that works, or maybe I'll just turn that a little bit more, or maybe you might alter it. You can use affirmations in that way really powerfully to change the story through their language. Okay, so I don't want to get into too much of the nuances and the techniques today. I just want to impress upon you this idea that your story isn't true, first of all. Sorry to tell you, but it's okay. That's great news, really, right? It can be a bit disconcerting for a while because it's like, well, if it's not true, have I just lived a lie? Has my whole life been a lie? Well, kind of, but the good news is you get to create a new story. And this is why we're here. We are such creative beings naturally. We actually can create the reality we want to based on the stories we tell ourselves. It's quite miraculous and amazing. Oh gosh, my camera is balanced in this precarious little nook. Okay. All right, that's probably the main points I wanted to share with you today. Like I said, I've got a course coming up that is going to really dive deep into this stuff. It's my story mentoring online course. It is, I'm not doing the work, guys. I'm just going to present some motivating, inspiring webinars, 7 of them, over a course of 11 weeks. And in between, you get to do the work. I'm going to give you lots of exercises on ways that you can work with your story. And I'm also going to help people who are kind of a bit more ready to maybe publish or think about ways to present their story, because that is quite an important part of reclaiming your story. It's another important phrase to take home as a message, is that you can. So many of us carry stories that we never consciously created, that were given to us, and that we've really outgrown. So we get to reclaim our story and realize it as one of the most powerful recovery tools that we have. So if that excites you, please do check out my website. I've got the links below. The mentorship is online webinars, so you can join from anywhere in the world. I will record them, but as well as that, I'm going to do for each group member some private mentoring sessions as well as part of the overall price. So please check it out if you feel called and if you feel ready to really unpack this story of yours and transform it for the better. Okay, so cool. Thank you. I'm going to go now because the light is just doing weird things in forests, and now my face is really dark and I don't know what's going on. I hope you can all see me. I'm sorry. I'm sending you all lots and lots of love wherever you all are in the world, and thank you for subscribing to my channel. Please like it, please comment. I would really like to get above 399 subscribers, so if you've just joined me and you've hung in this long, can you please subscribe if you haven't already, and then I'll be really happy. Thank you so much. Love you all. Bye.